Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric, this being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Beast Must Die. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, the opening shows us the situation with George and Lena, kind of, I think, that night where things happened. I think it's just guilt and everything, but the way that scene was cut together, like, it's just like, oh, like, he's complimenting her, because, like, for Lena, there's a lot of issues she has with her sister, like, a lot of, like, her sister has all these great memories, and it's like, my sister's so successful, she has this and that, but she's so kind of ungrateful, because for Lena, it's like, you have everything I would want, but yet you're unhappy, so it's that thing of, like, why would you be unhappy? Like, I would, be out celebrating if I had all that you had, and so it kind of has to deal with their mother, too. There's a lot of issues there. But when it cuts to, like, him complimenting her and everything, and, like, oh, you're so free. And she's like, what? And she's like, free to do what? Kind of like, whatever you want. And then it hard cuts to her, like, sitting in the bed, just kind of lamenting about it. Like, I didn't know whether it was, like, was that a lot? At first, I was like, is it more, like, I think it is just, like, I can't believe I did what I did. But also, like, it's also, like, him making you feel that way. Like, oh, he made her feel special, because I think probably in her sister's shadow, she always felt like she was in her sister's shadow, so I think that played an element to it, just because I think for her, it's like, in this one moment, I had a little slice of what you had, like, I felt special, I felt important, like, I kind of had everything, but then just, but I think afterwards, it just, the guilt of, like, what she did, just, like, riddled her. Frances isn't having the success that she was kind of hoping she would, because obviously she's talking to Violet. It's like, oh, what do you think about when you're swimming? She's like, nothing, which is a lie, because what she was thinking about was, like, time she spent with Marty, but obviously a lot of that she has to keep hush-hush, because it's like, right, I can't let them know, because she can't even hint to her past, because if she hints to her past at all, she's afraid, like, obviously they might put two and two together, and it might give George enough to, like, shut up and, like, push her out, instead of pulling her in where she can find out more information and find all the evidence she needs. But talking to Violet, Violet talks about, like, obviously, like, she's kind of glad that Philip kind of got suspended, because that way they get to spend more time together. Like, she was sick beforehand, so they never really got to spend some time. In particular, she was in the hospital, and she talks about, like, Joy and George. She's the one that kind of revealed, like, that George has, like, a messed up, like, shoulder or something, but he takes, like, pain pills to make it seem like he's okay. Because at first it's like, oh, could Joy have been here around that time? But it's like, no, Joy most likely snuck off to, her procedures. But it's like, and that even got Frances looking into, like, whiplash from, like, an impact with the car. So it started making her think, like, all right, so maybe this can solidify. Because for right now, she's unsure because she doesn't have anything, because all the evidence really doesn't really point towards him actually being a person. So now it's like, she's kind of back to square one. At the very least, she has a feeling it's George, but she doesn't have any evidence that can actually prove it. So she was actually talking to Violet about, like, right, she doesn't know what's happening next in the story. It's like, well, what do you want there to be next? Is, like, there to be evidence to prove what, that what has been committed or whatever. Obviously she's using the story as a proxy for what she's really feeling and wanting. So then there was the whole situation when they were all together at the beach and everything. And obviously they have, like, a Norwegian heritage. And so Violet comes out like, oh yeah, like, Mom used to come down the stairs, coming up the stairs, like, with the cake and everything, and sing this song. And Lena just looks so irritated by it, but we find out why, because for her it's like, Violet's like saying, like, oh yeah, barely ever remembered all the words, but it's like, none of, like, by the time, like, it was just me and Mom living in our small place, there was no stairs for her to climb, and also, like, she stopped singing at that point, so all Violet's great memories, like, oh, this stuff we did, it's like, no, those are your memories. I don't share that. I don't have that. Once again, it's just more stuff of just Lena feeling like, you have more than me, you had more than me, and it just irritates her to a certain extent. But the sad thing is, Violet just got her own issues too, and I think the reason why a part of the whole Frances thing, like, I think maybe on some level, because what was it? I believe Violet had said something of like, right, you should kind of count your blessings, like, yeah, to be a lucky one. And then Francis was like, yeah, but sometimes we are kind of unlucky ones as well, you know. So she was kind of giving Violet permission to be like, kind of, it's okay to kind of be down. I think when Frances looks at her, like, she sees a little bit of herself, I believe, just especially everything she's going through with Martin. Like, it's very different circumstances, but I think she doesn't look at Violet the same way like Lena kind of does with, like, resentment. And then there's the whole Philip thing, where it's like, once again, is she just doing that to manipulate the family? Which, yes, she is. Like, she's manipulating this family drama to her perspective so she can get in close to find out what she needs. But I think it is also as a mother and just seeing, like, you know, Philip's relationship with George, because she recognizes George is an asshole. And so I think for her, it's like, that's even more reason why she's, like, trying to be there for Philip. It's like, right, you know, because he's like, he hates his dad because his dad was like, oh, like, that's not what you think it is. It's a jellyfish, so someone needs to pee on it. He's like, if you want me to, I can pee on it. And he'd be like, oh, you could get one of the ladies here to pee on it. I'm sure you probably like, he's so demeaning to his son. And, but Francis is like, this is your mom's birthday, like, don't do it for him, but do it for her, like, you know, put on a smile and everything. And he comes over to his dad and apologizes. But then later on, like, all George does is like, yeah, I can't, nothing I can do is right with that kid. It's like, of course it's not, when you treat him like that. You treat him like shit, like you put him down. And it's like, I think he's so, like, legitimately, I think George is so far up his own ass sometimes he doesn't even realize what he's doing. I think he does, because even Leonard's like, no, like, don't get it twisted. Like, George likes winning. Like, he likes having power over people. Because he was talking to Francis about, like, oh, like, you're a teacher, maybe you have a way with that. You know, it's like, he's like, I love my son. I might not show it the perfect way, but I do love my son. He's still mine. But he's like, I wasn't really there for Philip, and so for him, it's like, I didn't really connect with him, so maybe that's why we had the oddball relationship we have now. But also, it's like, he talks about Philip getting caught cheating, but then, like, having that, oh, I'm so powerful, I can get away with anything. I can get away with murder, both literally and figuratively in this particular case. He told Philip, basically, don't get caught this time. And basically, that's the mentality he has of basically, if you don't get caught, then maybe you weren't. If you get away with it, maybe you were meant to get away with it. Obviously, that statement's going to rub Frances the wrong way, even to the point she's fantasizing about pushing him off the edge just to kind of have it all done with. But, like, once again, he has that higher, like, oh, I'm better than everyone mentality, and that is reflected in those statements. What was also interesting too, while Frances was changing, Joy came in and saw the C-section mark that she has and was like, okay. Even comes up later on, she brings it up to George about, like, oh, like, I don't know whether she said she doesn't have any children, which obviously that plays into the contradiction, but also it's like, yeah, George doesn't pay too much attention to what Joy is saying, because it's just kind of like, I do what I want, this is my house, I get to decide, like, Violet's going to love having them around, so I'm going to love having them around. You're the only one that's kind of being like a sourpuss in this particular case. And they censored it, so I'm not sure what she said. I don't know whether she was like, you're the only one, you and your son. Of course you're both happy, you're dick drunk. I think that's what it was. Whatever it was, it got censored. At least, you know, once again, the AMC version. I'm sure, like, maybe the original BritBox version wasn't. Whatever the case may be. But obviously it's like, right. He's like, you and that mouth of yours, if you don't like it, you can go for one of your other procedures. I'll even pay for it. So part of me is also like, is Joy only a dick because her brother's a dick? Or is it, I mean, even Francis straight up says it like Leno, being like, yeah, both of them are monsters. So I'm like, is it maybe their upbringing? Maybe it's just being high, like, I don't know if they talked about, well, I think they kind of talked a little bit about it. It seems like George comes from money. I'm assuming him and, like, Joy come from money because of what their dad did. So they might be owed money type of situation. So that might be that, like, why they have that, like, very posh, like, as I said, hoity-toity likeness to them. But regardless. Because Francis is the one that convinced Lena to stay. It's like, no, we could get like our own little special place. I can write, and you can also be near your sister, because obviously you want to have a better relationship with your sister, but you just don't want to be around George. Well, that got flipped around where it's like, no, don't buy a place. There's a summer home real close by, proximity and everything. And it's like, right. So, yeah, we don't have to pay for anything, but sadly, it kind of defeats the purpose, because we're still going to be so close to you, and that's not what Lena wanted. She wanted to be away. Which even Francis kind of confronts her later on about her self-destructive behavior, because obviously, like, she kind of messes up a gig that she has, because, like, someone was kind of hitting on her, and she kind of plays into it, and it's like she got in trouble for it. It was like a dignitary, but she was like, he could have said no at any point in time. But Francis kind of drills into her, don't let him have this control over you. Like, you don't let this guilt kind of drive you. Like, your guilt over, yes, you slept with your brother-in-law and you feel bad about it, but don't let that guilt drive you, because all you're doing is giving him the bigger win. Like, he gets the satisfaction of knowing, like, that you're breaking yourself to pieces over this. Don't give him the satisfaction. You smile. Like, be the one that sucks up the tension in the room rather than being the one that spreads it. So in a way, like, you can say, like, Francis is trying to, like, she's inadvertently helping this family heal, at least, you know, these two sisters, and even helping out Philip, but it is all for the means of, like, I need you to get your mess together so that it doesn't cause too much issues with my plan. So, once again, there's the selfishness, but there is a little selflessness in it, once again, because even the selfishness is for think of, hey, I'm trying to get justice. It's just kind of sad, because I think Lena legitimately looks at Francis as like, wow, you're like the only friend I really have. Because that was a whole thing too of like, I don't think Lena has many friends, and that's kind of sad that like her relationship with Francis is built on a lie and manipulation. But it's like, I think it actually means a lot to her, because it's like, right, you actually are helping me. You're the only person I feel like I actually have in my corner in that regard, you know? And obviously, she was avoiding also her friend, Sema, who was on the boat nearby. Because I was like, oh, because I was noticed she felt like, she kept being like, looking like she saw someone on the boat. And I was like, who does she see? And she kept getting a call from her friend. And you see her friend on the boat calling her. I was like, oh, she thought she recognized you. It's like, oh, I thought I saw you. But obviously, she's trying to cut all ties to the past, even going back to the mainland just to get stuff from her house, pack clothes. And she made sure to delete all the police files, like everything that's on that computer that's tied to Marty. Well, she couldn't delete the picture of him. She ended up keeping that. She just removed it from her background, which obviously her keeping that, because it's like, right, I can't get rid of every keepsake. I'm sure she's got plenty of photos, but it's hard enough that, like, she would have to taking that laptop there, but she won't be able to have any reminders of Marty, because all the pictures, she's got to leave them home because she can't bring it up around them. Which that in itself plays a role in this episode when she runs into Nigel, and it's like, oh, they actually talk a little bit about, she's like, oh, I have these new friends who don't know about Marty. It makes it easier that way, you know. But she's talking to Nigel, and she's like, actually, it's kind of nice this, you know, because Nigel's currently the only person she can really talk to about it. And it's like, oh yeah, because he's getting a gift for his niece. And it's like, how old is she? She's 5. And it's like, well, you know, what's her favorite joke? He's like, I don't know. You got to ask her. Like, at 5, it's most likely about a toilet or something. So, and I think that meeting made Nigel probably want to double down even more into where I think he also didn't want to bring it up to her about, like, right, what he's looking into with the whole, like, oh yeah, Garrity might have half-assed this investigation, but he didn't want to bring that up because he doesn't have anything solid to, like, any means. What he wanted to give her last episode, where he's like, I want to work to give her a way of finding a way to move forward, which he's kind of trying to do with Shannon. And because he's trying to tell Shannon, like, regardless of what you do, you're going to be the one putting all your money into this just for you to end up kind of with the result of it. Just, they're most likely going to come back being like, it's part of the job. Every cop, myself and Shannon included, knowing that whatever door you go through could be the end all be all for you. Or it could just simply be the end. I don't know why I say be all. But for Shannon's sister, it's like, no, but like, he bought a gun, but it's just, you know, he's just trying to, that's why I still feel like, is there more, there has to be more to that story, the way Nigel's handling it, because it does seem like he's got some guilt of his own about it. It could just be, obviously, coinciding with something else I'm watching. I watched today, the Republic of Sarah. There's a conversation of kind of guilt, and I talked about like that particular guilt mean more likely being survivor's remorse or survivor's guilt. Like maybe that's what he has in this piece. I had kind of brought that up last episode too. That maybe that's what that correlates to. That he just, it's like, right, it could have been me or it should have been me, and now, but it was her. I wonder what it is specifically that makes him feel like that more. Like there has to be something there. Granted, I'm sure he's gonna he feels even guiltier and weirder about it now because him and Shannon's sister hook up, and it's like, oh boy. We did learn a little bit more about him and his family. Obviously, his sister and his niece living in Australia, but also that his dad was like a criminal and his mom was a religious nut, and it's like, oh, like a therapist would have a field day with you, which I ironically enough he is in therapy. Which that doesn't go over well because the therapist is like, yeah, so either we stop and you, because I'm going away for like family stuff, either we stop our sessions and we pick them back up when I return, or I can suggest you to a new person. But obviously for Nigel, it's like, no, you're legitimately pawning me off and so on. He's like, is that how you see it? He's like, no, that's not how I see it. That's how it is. And because his therapist is saying like, I can't give you what you want me to give you. So I'm hoping that maybe someone else. I feel like that any progress Nigel might have been making kind of took a few steps back. Like I think I was like, you kind of shit the bed on that, doc. I mean, I think a therapist would have been able to handle that a little more delicately, because especially when you're in therapy, you're like in a very vulnerable state. I would think like that you'd handle that with a little bit more kid gloves than he did. It was just kind of like you kind of threw it in there like that, and it's just kind of like a. Especially because it's like, I don't know. I get it also because it's like, but it's like, it is a thing of, it does, make it seem like you are trying to pawn him off on somebody. Like, I can't, and even Nigel kind of interpreting it like, oh, you're narcissistic. You make people feel like they need you, and then when they do, like, you just up and, like, leave them. It's like, they're like, it's almost like a power control thing is kind of what he was kind of getting at, which I wonder, is that him projecting some other dynamic and putting it on his therapist in that regard. I just can't help but think and feel like that. But other than that, I forgot how I was about to say how. Oh, I'm trying to remember how Nigel got onto George again, and that was specifically by because obviously Nigel had set Home Dude to go after Nikki because it's like, yep, everything came back that like the glasses from Nikki shoe is from the bar, so which they go arrest him. He fights back, which he ends up dropping his knife, which Philip picks up and ends up putting the knife away, which you're like, okay, so he's most likely going to stab his dad at some point in time. I'm assuming that's how it's going to play out, so maybe Francis won't have to worry about it. Maybe Philip will kind of inadvertently end up taking care of that. We'll have to wait and see how that shakes out. But nevertheless, Nigel got George's name because getting someone else to look into Garrity's files, trying to figure out like what else it didn't match up, and it turns out George, Garrity in his files were saying that he was going to check on George, who had like his car might have been stolen or something like that, but there was never any any paperwork filed about that. So it's like, right, now he's putting it together like, oh, his car goes missing like a week after, his car disappears a week after the hit and run. So it's like, okay, there's definitely some shady business going on here. So, and especially because he goes, and I think it's not, once again, the interesting parallels where Francis is kind of manipulating someone, so does Nigel. He's manipulating Garrity's wife to be like, oh yeah, like we miss him down at the station. It's like, you didn't know the guy. You're actually, you only know the guy because you came here and replaced him. But it's like, oh yeah, like trying to cozy up to her, and it's like, right, do you mind if I use your husband's name at the lodge? And oh, I love golf, and it's like, okay, and we find out that's before while being there, he sees a picture of George and Garrity. So now we see why a lot of that evidence disappeared, because it's all it's like Garrity's whole thing was about connections and stuff like that. His wife was just talking about it. So makes you almost want. I'm sure maybe the guilt finally got to him. Maybe that's why he dropped dead on the wasn't it like a heart attack or something like on the golf course? I doubt it was. Like, I was about to say like no, let's there's foul play involved, but it's probably just karma getting back at him for kind of probably looking the other way when it came to a lot of stuff, because we already see what kind of person George is. That he is like, oh, I'm the type to do whatever I want. I want to win. I'm gonna get whatever I want. And I'll pay as much as it, to make any problems go away. So that's the effed up thing that obviously Garrity was investigating the case and ended up making evidence disappear. So now Nigel's kind of got his eyes set on George, which is interesting because the whole Nikki thing ties into that, considering he works there. So a lot of pieces in plays, like when one piece is kind of removed from the board, it kind of connects dots to something else. Obviously, like I said, with the Nigel thing, but also Philip picking up the knife. So there's that. There's Francis taking gun lessons. Obviously, it's about the time necessarily to get the license and stuff like that. But also, how long will it take for her to kind of learn? And it seems like it might be a 6-month thing, because the target in particular, she wasn't able to hit. But that was also a conversation she had with Lena of like, don't let him decide, because for Lena it was like, I just can't, I'm not really myself when I'm around him. But, she tells Lena like, I see him like you, I see him for who he really is. Don't let him shape who you're going to be. And that's who Lena kind of in her self-destructive nature because of him. And I think Frances was talking about that from her perspective of like, right, like I'm dreaming of killing him, but it's like, right, I'm not going to let him turn me into a monster or a murderer. But it's like, right, at the end of the day, what do you want? Like, I think that's still unclear, because I think even Frances isn't sure what she wants. Does she simply want to get enough evidence so he can go to jail, or does she want to kill him? I think with the previews and the trailer, I think it leans to her wanting to kill him, but I don't think it's immediate. Like, it's there, like, the elements of, like, oh, like, the rage gets to her, she wants to, but I don't think she initially wants that, but I think she's slowly but surely getting there, but trying to fight that back, because he did that, that doesn't mean, because he killed someone and took a life, even if it was my son, like, I think for her, it would be a thing of, I'll sully Marty's memory of no longer being the mom that he used to have, the woman that was his mom, if I go down this route. So we'll see. Just a lot of interesting stuff to keep in mind going forward. I'm interested to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, light to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.